to the next edition of Serverless Craic. All going well. How are we getting on?
Oh,
All good. All good. I'm all sitting here in my new studio this week, so
Very
ready.
good. Shelled out. Looks great.
On our
freshly generated.
freshly generated
Your AIs. Right.
metaverse.
So we're going through the book. We're on chapter 13, which is the first chapter about phase 3 and the value flywheel, which is next best action. So this chapter is the serverless first age. It's an interesting one. This will be an interesting one to go through. There's a lot in this chapter.
Yep.
Interesting to see how it stands up now after a few years. One of the things probably there was 3 tenets that we started off with. Each phase of the flywheel, we've 3 tenets, and really the big persona in this one was product leaders. And the 3 tenets are codes of liability, a serverless first mindset delivers value, a frictionless developer experience, an easy path to production, and then how to map your solution, aligning how you serve your customers. It's really kind of mapping out your capability.
Yep.
So I mean, those haven't gone anywhere.
Yep.
Code as liability is probably the big one that we'll hit on in this chapter.
And as a tenant that still stands up, especially with the pace of change we're now facing. You don't want your liabilities slowing you down or holding you back from adopting some of the more advanced emerging capabilities that we're all sort of battling with.
Yeah, I mean, these are all clearly aligned at obstacles, aren't they? It's removing obstacles. Even the term frictionless and lack of friction. It's all about being able to identify something to do and being able to do it.
Yep.
With speed, right?
But like, how many times have we seen it where some trend, the new technology comes out, everyone gets excited, we build this big thing, and then a while later, it's like, yeah, that's really slowing us down. You know what I mean? We wrote 1 million lines of code and it was great, but such and such a vendor has released this out now. It happens all the time. Yesterday's new technology is the thing that slows you down tomorrow. So the whole point around codes of liability is you shouldn't need, if it's not your core value proposition, you shouldn't build it. I mean, there'll be 1 million different companies today trying to build agentic platforms because it's the next big thing in AI. But unless you're a big AI company, probably no point doing that.
Yeah, it's a good point, actually. I mean, if you ask yourselves those questions, and engineers, typically you get a bad reputation if you just want to sit and write code all day. But really what we're saying is you want to write the right code, right? That code should be, if you are doing something, it should be directly against your USP, right? Your unique selling point. How are you differentiating? What is your, how will this add value? If someone else can do it, it's already done. Why would you do that again? Right? Why would you bog yourself down with that sort of liability? That's what we kind of talk about. Engineers tend to get offended when they hear that code is a liability. We're not saying, we're not insulting code or coders. It's more the focus is, anything that you create and you run with, it's not focused on that differentiation. It's probably a liability, right?
I think by all means, explore and experiment and try it out and understand the capabilities and what goes into making up that thing. But as soon as you had a good grasp of what it is, then think about how can I offload that to somebody else? How can I get the value from that thing without necessarily having to worry about the operational overhead of running it and maintaining it and patching it and evolving it and keeping it up with the latest things, right? So, you still need to understand what it is. But then once you understand what it is, you think about, well, how do I offload that to somebody else so I can focus on what truly is valuable to me and my organization.
And that's the whole thing about, like, this journey for us. It all started with moving to the cloud, because the thing I used to repeatedly ask in the organizations, why are we going to the cloud? Are we trying to be faster? Are we trying to be cheaper? Are we trying to simplify? Are we trying to standardize our tech? Are we trying to improve our security? Are we trying to keep up with the pace of change? Or maybe we're trying to do a bunch of those things, but you have to be very clear what that is, because you're not moving the cloud just to be in the cloud. And I still say it in talks today. The first step is migration, and then the next step is modernization. So you figure out what you want to be good at, and then you say, right, well, we're going to offload everything else and really focus on those things. So Serverless First wasn't about using a trendy technology. It's about offloading the things that you don't need to do. Yep. And people still don't really get that, which is interesting. The same with the AI race. It's like you need to figure out what's your value proposition in that. Go do that. Let someone else do the rest of it.
Do you think organizations sometimes suffer from sunken cost fallacy, or
yeah, completely
sort of things? Yeah.
And sometimes it's okay to build something. I mean, I think we did it a lot in the past where you need this capability. The cloud vendors don't have it yet. You build it, you get some value, and then they release a version of it. And then you think, right, well, they've just brought that out now. Let's just move to the thing they brought out, and we'll just retire the thing we built, because it got us 2 years, which is fine. But digging your heels in and avoiding the cloud vendors is always a very silly move,
Yeah.
And that's why it's really important to have a really good collaborative relationship with the cloud vendors, because they can get some insights into what's coming next, so you can make those bets a bit more confidently. Right? Hey, we're going to build this for 6 months because we know there may be a new capability emerging that we can move to and get rid of our custom built capability. Right?
Even it's like the DDD stuff, the core domains versus the supporting domains. If you're building something in a supporting domain, you almost need to say to yourself, I know this is temporary. Am I in a position to offload this if a vendor can ever supply it? And I'm not going to offload my core stuff, because that's our business.
I think that was the time back to last week's chapter with Gillian and Workgrid, the whole sort of pragmatic approach. Do just enough to kind of get your stuff out, and then kind of worry about that. Further on.
It means that, and we talk about this in the intro of the chapter, but if you don't have a lot of liabilities that are holding you back, it's easier then to do the next right thing. It's easier to do the most impactful, most value add thing, because you don't have a lot of legacy or inertia or technologies that you've custom built that are hard to get off of, right? Because you've removed a lot of the code liability. So the more you're up the value chain and you're only focusing on differentiating things, the easier it is to then move to do the next right thing.
Your frictionless developer experience, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then, I mean, I think it's almost like with Serverless First, it's like, right, we're going to have this shape as we move to the cloud. And then I know we started using the term the modern cloud and then legacy cloud. And that was the thing that I think we started to see with early migrations. When you see in the early days, teams would take a really old school application and just drop it from a height into the cloud and go, ta-da, we're in the cloud. And it's like, well, you're not really. You're still releasing once a month. You know what I mean? You still have a huge data model that's a mess. There's still loads of tech debt. And it's really the microservices principle. For me, legacy cloud is when you're maybe in the cloud, but you don't have all the advantages. And modern cloud is when you've done all these things that you can move fast, and you can really have that, I would say, business agility. And there's certainly, and we broke out some characteristics of that. I still think that concept stands up, modern cloud, and it's I don't think it's as progressed as much as I would have liked to, but I'm not really surprised.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point you made earlier about the migration, start with migration, and sometimes you will end up with it's almost like doubling up on operations, right? You'll have cloud level, you'll have the cloud providers with their own ops teams and running their own stuff, but then you'll have your own operations team and running your sort of your containers or your network or whatever that is, right? But you'll kind of get yourself into the cloud, but then that may buy you've still got to continue that journey, right? You've got to invest in sort of how do we become modern cloud? How do we invest more in growth as opposed to run, and being able to kind of capitalize on that and some transition some of that ops burden that over to the provider. So and that does require you to think in different ways. And and I think in a future episode you're going to get into some of the myths, right? But
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the characteristics stand up. Like, well, we talk about microservices being loosely coupled and scalable, being cloud native, right?
yeah,
Being abstracted, pay per use, low operational overhead, and then leverage your cloud provider properly. They're good principles and good sort of characteristics that we can still say are pretty good, right?
Well, here the sad thing is like, are they not? Is that not just good architecture?
Yeah.
I mean, like the 12 factor app. I think that's out what since about 2010 or something like that, 2012. About this good 15, 13 years ago. Um, but I suppose it doesn't have just good granular modular architecture. It's been around for decades. But I
Yeah.
suppose it doesn't have the low operational overhead and the pay per use. That's kind of new, and leveraging the cloud provider. That's probably new, but a lot of it's just good architecture, and that's probably the sad part. A lot of applications are built with really bad architecture, but I suppose the fact that your cloud structure is forcing these constraints, it's making you have a blast radius, it's making you have least privilege, you know. It's probably not as hidden as it used to be.
Yeah. They're good in the
yeah. I think I don't know. I'm trying to look at that and think, has anything changed in terms of what we've been doing in the last few years? But my head goes to the whole shared responsibility model.
Yeah.
Like the one AWS have published. I mean, I think you understand that a lot more, I think, when you're in modern cloud, right? Because you do understand what I'm responsible for and what the cloud providers are responsible for, and you buy into it, right?
Mm.
Um,
a lot more of
but I think that's largely covered, right?
yeah, and a lot more of the full stack is visible to you when you're in the cloud versus if you're in the traditional data center where another team would have taken care of that and you might not have had any insights or any sort of visibility into just what was going on behind under the hood on that server, right? So I think it does make you a better engineer and a better architect because you have much more visibility of the entire solution, right? That is, you're in control of it all, I guess. You're responsible for it all.
Mm. Would you say though? I'd say your teams probably think a lot differently though, right? I think within sort of maybe legacy cloud, your teams are more constrained in thought, potentially, right? You're used to working within really strict, stringent enterprise procurement type guardrails, whereas modern cloud, you're more open-minded.
I
You're
would say,
in a lot of the new stuff.
yeah, but I challenge that. I think there's constraints in both, but I think the
Yes.
constraints in legacy cloud are unnecessary. Like
Yeah.
there's no reason you need to wait 6 months to get a new service.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's not a constraint. That's just an inefficiency. But
Yeah.
some of the constraints in modern might be around like, oh, you can't call that because that's in a different account. Like
Yeah.
it's actually healthy. You shouldn't be allowed to call that, you know,
Yeah. So McCann calls as enabling constraints, right?
Yep.
evening constraints. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
friction's in the right places, right?
So and then so I think there's a lot in this chapter, so maybe we'll keep it going next time, but maybe we'll close there's five kind of modern cloud inertia points, which I think are interesting to talk through.
Yeah.
The first one was legacy cloud, which we had talked about a wee bit. And that I like that term because you almost saying that you can be legacy in the new thing. Like legacy doesn't mean old. Do you know what I mean? Legacy just is it's potentially something that's outdated, which isn't necessarily old.
Yeah, you've done your lift and shift, but you've maintained the same mindset, same processes, same practices, same deployment
Yeah.
frequencies, and you haven't done any of the modernization steps that truly unleash the value of moving to the cloud.
It's more like a traditional way of thinking, like.
Yeah.
And then there's lack of business alignment because one of the things with cloud modernization or migration is it's a big shift, and there's a lot of things need to change within engineering, and there's a lot of things that need to change, and it's really a business process optimization. So it's transformational activity, So you do want the organization behind that. It's not an IT project.
Yeah. It's back to the clarity of purpose, and we've touched on in earlier chapters as well. It's like the tech that you deploy should be aligned to a business problem that you're trying to solve. It should be aligned to delivering business value. So, that linkage is much clearer if you do this properly in the cloud.
Yeah. I mean, like if you're doing a big modernization, you want stakeholders key stakeholders in the organization to be behind it. It's not just this under the covers thing. Another initial point was fear of vendor lock-in. This used to be a massive one. I'm not sure it's as big as it was, but I still think it's an issue. Gregor Holt does a few talks about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you start probing into the first one around legacy cloud and why people do maintain the shape, you normally kind of then run into this sort of thing, right? And a lot of these fears kind of present themselves.
And here's the thing: you're always locked into something, so it's like just be more deliberate about it. Even it could be an open source project. And then I like this one, that serverless is not the point. We shamefully stole this from Ben Kehoe, but we did reference him, so I think that's okay. And I remember being very impactful. He did this blog. Oh, it could have been what, 10 years ago, maybe. It's like the point is not functions, managed services, operations, cost, code, or technology. The point is focus. That's the why of serverless. And he does brilliant blog, which is like all these things. That's not the point. That's not the point. And that was really hitting that as engineers, we'll focus on the tech and think the tech is the be all and end all. But it's you're kind of missing it.
Yeah, and I think you've a line in here around serverless first should be a reminder to not sweat the small stuff. Focus on your business and delivering value to your customer instead. That's nice. That still stands up.
I think that's
we should actually do that. Yeah, I was going to so much trouble with saying this. If you're a software engineer, your job is not to write code. Your job is to solve problems for the business that you're in. I always get a load of abuse for that. People say, I'm a programmer, I write code. Well,
well, given the current climate, I think that's even more relevant than ever.
That's
right?
True.
Coding is a very small part of your typical engineer's job. Right.
You're seeing it now. A lot of the big companies they're doing all their AI assisted code and whatever, and they're saying they're getting maybe a 10-20% lift on efficiency. And that's because that's probably about the time where people sit and code. A lot of the time is talking to people, doing designs, figuring stuff out. A lot of human activity happens as a software engineer.
And then the last sort of myth or inertia point is around it's a mindset for engineers. It takes a while longer to the people to overcome, right?
Yeah, this is massive. I mean, the fact that they're like, when you first looked at AWS or any of the cloud consoles, it's like a kid in a candy store. You have all this stuff, you can get it at the click of a button. It's absolutely insane the much you have access to. And I'm sure people are used to that now, but that was unbelievable a few years ago. And again, I mean, the whole idea of DevOps, like that, when DevOps came about, it was about breaking down that silo between having to order a server, waiting, and then have someone configure the server, and you give them their code and they run it. The dev team and the ops team put that together, and one team does it all. And that was a real stretch when DevOps kind of came about first. But then when the cloud came along, it was like, well, we can do anything that we need to do. So that serverless first mindset was about, well, you don't need to be doing all that underlying stuff, like configuring servers and messing about with low-level stuff. You can just focus on your problem.
Yeah. And I think we mentioned it here, but you have the access to probably trillions of dollars worth of investment in cloud technologies and services and capabilities at your fingertips, right? And that's just amazing. Even to this day, it's still amazing that any developer can basically leverage these capabilities for pennies, right? And like they're taking advantage of a massive amount of investment that's just they can never have done on their own. Their organization can never do on their own, and it's crazy that that's now available to them, and it's instantaneous that they can do stuff and solve real problems with these capabilities within minutes.
Yeah, but I would argue, like, again, I don't want to go off and go too deep, but even if you look at the last chapter and this chapter, and really what we've been saying is like serverless has never been easy. What was Gillian's quote last week?
It's not easier, it's better.
But it's better. And then the thing is, when we've been kind of working with teams and arming teams with this way of working, shifting a lot of that left, it's the infrastructure, it's the code, it's the focus on the value, it's the focus on solving the right problem, it's understanding your situation, creating your situational awareness. And then even kind of moving into the LLM and the agentic era, those teams are going to be way more equipped to kind of deal with that and accelerate and and take advantage of that 10 to 15% than maybe teams that really haven't been through that holistic kind of picture and thinking that way. Wardley's old saying is, he'd rather kind of take one of these engineers and train them in the business than the other way around. I'm wondering, I still feel like that's the way it's kind of moving, right? So this is a great chapter. I still think that's a really strong point. But the engineers that kind of work in this way, that's how they think.
It's funny. I don't think we're there yet. I mean, another way of phrasing it is abstraction. Be comfortable with abstractions. And that's always been a problem for software engineers. I remember when I started my career, people coding there are certain programmers in C would be very uncomfortable because they didn't like the machine code it was generating underneath, you know what I mean, or whatever, or the assembly. So and there's always level of abstraction where older programmers don't trust the abstractions, but at some point you have to trust these abstractions and realize you're not being paid to know what's happening under the bonnet. You're being paid to drive the car. So it's a different way of thinking. It's been more comfortable in the abstraction, which
it also helps them move up the value chain. Right? If you understand your situation, you understand the technology, you understand what the business problems are, you can make sure that your team and your engineers are actually delivering valuable impact for the business or your stakeholders, right? That moves you up the value chain. You're not sweating the small stuff. You're not thinking about the minutiae. You're thinking about business impact. You're thinking about delivering value. That's a very important thing to keep in mind, especially with this AI agentic wave where people are starting to question the value of engineers or teams or what the architects or whoever delivers, right? Having this mindset helps make sure that you can move yourself up the value chain.
Yeah, 100%. That's a good way to that's the crack. And I think that's a good way to close us out. So that's chapter 13, Serverless First. We'll do the rest of that next time. So give us a like or a follow on the Serverless Edge and keep tuning in. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.